Hi everybody, it's me, Lucille Isadora Therese. I am here to bring you some tools, some context, and a way to be with and make use of the situation we're in with the pandemic for your spiritual growth and development and for your emotional health and development. So, it's been a really intense couple months, and it's something that I've noticed has brought up a lot of conflict for people internally and externally. And when I look at social media, I'm seeing a lot of us and them, a lot of finger pointing and wanting to find the bad guys and point fingers and argue about reality. And I was feeling that a lot last week, and I was really drawn to let myself really feel it and feel caught up in it and feel how powerful a drive it is, how much it's tempting to get into these arguments and to want to be right and to want to prove a point. And I was noticing how much disdain was in those conversations, and fear and anger and rage and contempt, and how toxic all that was. And so I was really asking myself the question and hoping to get insight about why that was and what we can do with it. And then a few days ago, it started sorting and I got clear about it. And so I want to share that with you. So one of the things that I saw was that we're in a situation where there is a lot of restriction, there's a lot of unknown, and there's a lot of fear. And we are being asked to stay still in a lot of ways, to stay at home, to restrict access socially and otherwise in the world. So that means that what's really going on is we have our fight or flight system, which is all amped up from the danger, the fear, and not just the fear of the virus, but also fear of losing wages, or fear of changes in our society, or fear of being confronted with feeling like a bad parent or a bad worker, or all these things that get stirred up when the environment is changing so much and we're asked to do a bunch of new stuff at the same time, right? So there's a lot of fear, anxiety, and at the same time restriction. And so our fight or flight systems are being kicked in. So we have this urge to fight or flee. We can't really flee. Some people are trying. Some people are trying to get away from social media, to just sort of run away from any news or any messages about what's going on because it overwhelms them so much. That's the flee response. But for a lot of people, there's this sense that I have to do something. And what that something isn't clear. And there's so much restriction that that we're pointing that energy at creating enemies, looking for who's the bad guy, conspiracy theories, being angry at people who have a different perspective than us about how to deal with this pandemic, and what order, at what severity, right? We find these things, and people are latching on to groups and videos and ideas that make a really clear them. These are the people that are doing this. These are the people that are responsible for this. These are the people that are profiting off of this, right? There's a lot of this energy that's like really loving anything that gives a really strong, clear they. Who to be mad at, who to hate, who to blame, who to rage against. And that's really natural, because as I said, the combination of having our fight or flight systems kicked in and not being able to do a lot of things, not being able to feel productive out in the world, then that feeling of fight in our system gets all congested and it feels very uncomfortable. And if we can point it at someone, if we can point that energy at someone and be like, that's the problem, they're the problem, then like we feel vindicated, we feel righteous, we feel heroic even, right? That we're we're finding the liars, we're finding the bad guys, we're finding the corruption, we're finding the badness, and we're attacking it. And so then it makes us feel like, oh, I'm doing something good, and I'm fighting bad. So then all this stuff is proliferating. But the problem is when we're looking for something like that, we're not really processing super rationally. We're not using our highest skills and our highest motivations. We're reacting out of this really uncomfortable feeling. And so then what we're getting is a whole lot more fighting and division amongst ourselves. And like I said, like a lot of this feeling of contempt and disgust, which is a very toxic emotion when expressed. John Gottman is a famous marriage researcher, and he has these 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. They're marriage destroyers, and one of them is contempt. Because when we express disgust and contempt, it is so corrosive to relationships. And if you have had that pointed at you, you know it feels so violating and so hurtful that it can just erode a trust and love in a relationship. And so we have to be really careful during this time that as we're looking for these outlets, as we're looking for very clear answers in an ambiguous situation, right? We have all this ambiguity. We have all this lack of surety, lack of clarity, lack of absolute information, a lack of a super clear plan, tons of lack of agreement, right? There's all this stuff that's very ambiguous, very unclear and unresolved. And so those feelings are naturally seeking some kind of outlet. But we have to, in order to transform ourselves and transform the planet, it's so important that we own those feelings. We validate. So we don't want to do spiritual bypassing, okay? We don't want to go like, oh, I don't do that. I'm beyond all that. I spread love and light. I don't feel any of it. Because if you don't feel it, you can't change it. If you don't let yourself experience it, then you can't transmute it. So in terms of alchemy, spiritual transformation, we have to experience something in order to transmute it. So you have to do that in whatever capacity you can do. And if you can't, I'm not saying you need to watch tons of news or social media or overwhelm yourself with it, but you have to tune into that feeling. Tune into all the fear and angst and uncertainty and adjustment. So much change has happened in so many people's lives, right? It's just really stirred up. So if we tune into that, and we can first have compassion for ourselves, like, hey, my life has been changed dramatically. A lot of things I was sure about, I can't be sure about anymore. What I'm doing next month, how my job is going to continue, what's going to happen with kids in school, right? There's so many things that are uncertain. So first, settle, tune in, feel yourself, and have compassion for yourself. Hey, of course, this is hard. This is challenging. I feel unsettled. I feel the adrenaline system. You can notice how that feels in your body and how sticky and interesting pointing at someone and some group or some idea is, like some outlet. You can acknowledge that. And then be kind to yourself about that. Like, you can say to yourself, hey, I want to fight with people. I want to make someone wrong, or I want to find who's responsible, who's the bad guy in this. And then you can, as you tune into that feeling in yourself, also remember that all those other people are that way too. They're feeling the same thing you are in various ways. And everyone is trying to cope with it. And we all have different sets of resources and different capacities. And so we're dealing with it in different ways. But it's not about finding out whose actions are best and worst. It's about reopening your heart to connection to everyone. And it's okay to know that someone's behaving inappropriately. And some people definitely are behaving inappropriately with these hurt feelings and angst and anxiety and fear and uncertainty. But the thing that we can tune into in compassion and connection and authentic vulnerability is that everyone's struggling to work out their feelings, to understand how the world is, how the world is going to be. We have so much uncertainty still, so much unsettledness. And that's going to be different for different people in the terms of the way it expresses or which parts of it are hardest. But it's in the mind and it's in the group consciousness. So if you want to be a change agent in the group consciousness, then you have to, one, be honest with yourself, be real with yourself about how you're feeling, about what's coming up. Be kind and compassionate with yourself. In order to do that, you have to really be present. You have to acknowledge that it's hard. Acknowledge what's coming up. Acknowledge which parts feel the most overwhelming or compelling. Do your own self-soothing, self-compassion work. And then, having made peace with what is, you can open your heart to that same pain in other people, especially those who you don't like, whose politics are different from yours, whose perspectives you find agitating, annoying, wrong, ridiculous. If you open your heart then to go, those are people who have the heart like my heart, who feel stressed and confused and anxious and angry, and that we're all limited, that we all have limited resources. We don't have an infinite capacity to process stress. We don't have an infinite capacity to deal with fear. And so we're all limited, and we're working with our limitations the best we can. And then bringing that sense of willingness, presence, compassion into the group consciousness by tuning in your heart and feeling that underneath all of this anger and finger pointing and rage and reactivity, underneath all that is fear, anxiety, adrenalized bodies, so much information that's hard to process, information overwhelm, emotional overwhelm, change overwhelm. Tune into that, have compassion, and share some of your own healing. So as you've processed anything in your own system, you can share that. It's kind of like a little antibody. So this viral metaphor works that we are all part of the group consciousness, and we can all be part of our group consciousness immune system. So we're only one cell. We don't have power to change the whole system, but we can create an antibody in ourselves. We can create an antidote in ourselves, which is by processing and having compassion and having an open heart. And we can bring that into the greater body consciousness. And when we do that, we offer one cell of transformation, one little piece, but we also then draw and encourage other cells to do the same. So every cell that does it, it's an example, it's sort of a light in the darkness to other souls that want that, but they haven't quite realized they could do it. And they go, oh, there it is, I can do that. And so it starts spreading this positive immune response in the system. So we've had this toxic immune response in our system, which is aggressive. It's sort of like an autoimmune disorder where we're attacking our own cells, we're attacking each other and hurting each other instead of really cleansing our system of the real danger, the real virus, which in this case is fear and hate. So, and misunderstanding, right? So we can start leading that change by doing our own work, building a positive transformational experience in ourselves. Even if you can't do it totally, that's fine. You can't totally transform your experience with it, that's fine. Any piece that you can do, any piece you can move through and then bring it with love into meditation, into the group consciousness, then you are part of creating a cascade of transformation, of reunification, of reminding our whole body of the human race that other souls are not the enemy, other beings are not the enemy, and that we are strongest when we work together in love and compassion for one another. And then, when you've done that and you really feel that in your body, you really feel the change, then you can look again for ways to contribute, ways to help. But I think this is really important as an internal work. This is the mystical work, the contemplative work. This is self-responsibility, and harnessing your power as a creator for the greater good of the group. Do your own work. Be honest, be real, be compassionate with yourself. Whatever transformation you experience, bring that blessing into the group consciousness with intention. And be part of the creation of a cascading light in our group consciousness. Cascade of love, compassion, presence, unity, care. To remember how much we have in common and how much we are of one body underneath all the reactivity and surface differences. And clean out from your system this misunderstanding that people whose points of views annoy you, agitate you, or who are wrong or seem wrong, that tells you who they are. It doesn't tell you who they are. Who they are is much deeper than that. And you have an incredible amount in common with almost every other human being. So sink past all the differences, past the surface reactions, and the natural inclination to get into a fight mode, to try to find something to be right about, to be sure about, to be absolute about, to find the bad people and the wrong people, which makes us feel safer. That's all valid. And if you work through that in yourself, then you can offer that little piece of transformation into the group mind to heal. Blessings on that process, and I'm doing that work and putting that into the group consciousness, and everyone who joins me will help create that cascade in my little space, in our greater space. Blessings.